Dad always used to say the only causes worth fighting for were the lost causes.
The Senator yield. No, sir, I will not yield.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
You're listening to a Pyrolitical Pyrocast.
And welcome to the Pyrocast presented by Pyrolitical Radio Show. Hey, everybody. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Randall.
We got some great topics tonight. Randall, why don't you give us an overview?
Education.
Edumacation?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, what's the purpose of edumacation? Is it just to edumacate people? Or
what? Were you educated in a barn? Come on, man.
Dude, I love my barn.
You love your barn. Yes, we're talking education. And before we get into this, we just want to invite you to go watch this on Pyrolitical.com. We have our YouTube channel, which is Pyrolitical Live. That's streaming into the site. Or you can listen through iTunes or another type of player. So we just want to encourage you to go over there and subscribe. So, Randall, let's get into this. I suggested this topic tonight because I went to a meeting last night that had all to do with edumacation. So we just thought this would be a great time to do it. There's an initiative out called Our Schools Now in Utah, backed by some of the biggest power players and elites in the political arena and business. So we want to talk about it.
Amen, brother. Amen. So I think we should start by talking about what the purpose of education is. We should level the playing field. I mean, why do we as a society choose to educate? And why do we choose to do it the way that we do it? You know, I think it's interesting because, you know, obviously there are a lot of people that say, well, it's a social thing. You know, we want to train children in a certain way.
Socialize.
Yeah, we want to socialize them. Exactly. And it's less. And really, you know, hey, you know, all cards on the table. I'm a homeschooling father. You know, we've homeschooled almost all our children. You know, there have been times where one or two of them have gone to school, to a public government school.
Right.
But so I just want to make sure that people understand that. So I am a little biased. But, you know, why do we choose to educate them the way we do? Because when we tell people, when my wife and I tell people, I mean, not so much lately, but especially early on when we said, well, we homeschool or we choose to homeschool or we're thinking about homeschooling our kids or whatever, the most common reaction wasn't, they won't learn math or they won't learn how to read. That was never the reaction. It was, well, they won't get any social interaction. They won't learn how to socialize with other individuals. I was like, that's really interesting, you know, because school, you know, traditionally it's not, you know, presented as the socialization of your children or the teaching of your children how to be social animals. It's all about reading, writing, arithmetic, right? The 3 R's.
Well, it should be.
But that's how the press talks about it. That's how the public talks about it. That's how the politicians talk about it. We're concerned about educating your children, but when you talk about them about not being in that realm, all of a sudden it's, whoa. Your kids aren't going to know how to talk to other people. It's going to be crazy, and they're going to explode. Exploding children. That's what happens.
Well, one of our friends, Oliver DeMille, wrote a book called The Thomas Jefferson Education. And he said that's one major concern is that the kids will turn out weird. And his retort to that is they'll only turn out weird if the parents are weird.
Hey, you know what? There are weird kids in the public education or the government education system. I'm just going to say that.
That's the second retort to that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say Randall is weird, but it's on purpose. Like, he's weird sometimes.
Some.
But it's true. Like, that's one of the biggest fears is that when you meet homeschooled kids is that they're not going to be not just socialized, but, able to be normal in society, that they won't be able to converse or they won't know what's going on in the world. And I saw a study last night that on the SAT, homeschooled kids are spanking, absolutely destroying public school educated kids. They're just, I mean, it was amazing, but the study found that the homeschool kids knew a lot more about a wide range of topics than, so it wasn't just they're doing better in math, it's they're doing better in everything by a remarkable percentage. And so that's a testament to those hardworking homeschool parents. Not that parents who send their kids to public school aren't working hard,
Right.
but they're just working hard on their career. They're not working hard on educating their kids. And I'm not condemning anyone, because my kids are one's in charter, one's in public, and one's going to a private school this year. So I got them spread out in every kind of system there is. So
Good on you,
I know
mate.
I'm kind
Good
of
on you.
weird that way. Good on me.
Yeah. That's what they say in Australia. Good on you, mate. Good on you. Too right. Too right.
Yeah, you've been to Australia, so
I have been. And it's interesting, because they have a big emphasis on schools over there as well, but it's different. It's not the same as it is here. I mean, the schools are functional. At least the ones that I saw, they were very functional, but they were not grandiose, Buckingham Palaces. We'll talk about that later. But you brought up Australia. Anyway, it's just interesting where we have this idea, or at least we're told that we need to educate our children. And there's a process which is prescribed in how to do that, and that's the way the government has chosen to educate the kids. Now, I have to give a lot of kudos to our legislators, specifically here in Utah and also in other states, because it wasn't, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, homeschooling was unheard of, right? People just couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. And the opportunity for homeschooling kids or alternative forms of education, charter schools and whatnot, have blossomed. They've grown tremendously over recent years, and they've made it much easier for a family to choose an alternative option besides just the cut and dry government schools. And some educators may say that that's hurt their schools, because it's taken a lot of those that would be the cream of the crop and moved them off into a charter school where they may have a little more opportunity, a better teacher to student ratio, or home with their parents because they're a savant, or they're just really good at whatever they want to specialize in, and so they take that element out of the school and the school suffers. So okay, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I want to point out how archaic our education system is. It is a Industrial Revolution relic. It's a conveyor belt segregated by grades. At a meeting last night for our schools now, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about this initiative that's going to raise our tax burden $700 million, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that. But as I heard these teachers get up and stand and tell what they thought about it, of course they were all for it, and all the administrators, they said, I'm a fourth grade teacher of this, or I'm a ninth grade teacher to that. And I thought, the old school method of, we had the little red schoolhouse and you lumped all the kids together, by different ages. They were just all in there. There's a principle there that we've lost, because if you think about it, if you have older kids, let's just say it was grades 6 through 12. If you have kids 12 to 18, they can teach the younger ones a lot. They've learned a lot more. They've been through puberty and teenage years. When they get to 18, they have a lot of wisdom to offer. And you can also put them together in groups, and to me, that would speed up the youth. And then the older ones get the educational experience of teaching and sharing. And that's really what education should be. It's getting the mind to think in new ways. It's questioning assumptions and learning things that you can't learn without other people's experience. And we've seen this in societal norms, and we've seen it in the way cultures work, is when the old men would come in and take the young men and educate them and mentor them You get a similar effect when there's older kids with younger kids. And then the teacher's there to facilitate case studies and simulations and discussions and to really challenge all of them. Then these young kids see the older ones debating the teacher, and they start to form their own opinions. But when they're all segregated by grade and age, they're all about the same. There's a few stars here and there, but they all have to learn the same thing. So there's no opportunity for everyone to go at their own pace, or there's very little, because they all have to learn the same thing.
Well, and you bring up some good points, Thomas. Thank you. Because, yeah, I mean, this is a relic of the Industrial Revolution. We wanted to systematize things. We wanted to make things orderly. These age kids go here, these age kids go here. But what we found is consistently we find kids that end up getting left behind. Either they don't learn at the same speed as the other kids, or they learn faster than the kids that are in the same grade, and there's no real good provision built in for those kids. And besides that, I mean, you've got let's take for example guy, I can't remember his first name. Anyway, Khan, he's created this online academy called Khan Academy, right? It's free. You can use it. It doesn't cost you anything. You can donate what you want, and he'd encourage you to donate to help keep the doors open, obviously, but anyone can use it. And the neat thing about this is it utilizes technology to take a kid and chart their progress, but the subjects are all based on mastery, not teaching to a test. See, that's what we're trying to do in the government education system, is we want to prove outcomes. We want to say these students are actually learning, they're actually growing at a certain rate, so we're going to reward teachers that do better than others, and the teachers hate this system as well as the students. But and
if you tie test outcomes to funding, that's what you focus on. And
yeah, exactly. So the kids in the government education system, they're not there to learn. They're there to memorize certain facts and figures, to pass the test, make the teacher look really good, and that's what they focus on, and then we move on. In something like, he does a TED Talk, this guy, Mr. Khan, if you can find it, where he explains his reasoning behind this, because he's like, here you have a kid in a regular school, okay? They're learning algebra, and they go and take a test, and they get 65%. Well, or 75%, whatever. Maybe they pass the test. But what we've proven by the test is that the student doesn't know at least 25% of the material. And in the traditional teaching methods, we go through and we say, okay, test's fine. You got a great score, you got a poor score, whatever. This is the new material today. We're going to teach you this new material. It builds on the stuff you're missing 25% of, but we've got to move on because the whole class is moving on. And he says, so we do this, and it leaves these kids behind. They miss a fundamental method in algebra, and all of a sudden they go to the next test and the next test and the next test, and they miss more and more and more. Not all the time, but a good chunk of the time. Or even if they pass the test, they may not understand this one principle that they missed back on test number 1 that they didn't know 25%. And
you're describing me in high school with algebra. I'm not kidding.
Totally.
I got left behind.
It's not just you. It happens to so many students, and they just go to get to the end, to get the grade, to get out of the class, to move on to the next subject where they can start fresh the next year. And they're not focused on mastering that subject. They just want to get through it. And that's what the education system propels them to. So this guy in his Khan Academy, and we've had our kids use it. It's all based on mastery. So you take a topic, a subject, a principle in mathematics or science or wherever, and you go through some practice questions until you're getting it right X number of times, 3 or 5 times. You have to get it right in a row, and then it will let you go through a mastery challenge. And if you pass them all, through the mastery challenge, then you've mastered it, you get to move on. So someone who really grabs a hold of it, they get through it really quick. But somebody who is having a hard time, it gives them plenty of opportunity to learn and grow and understand the concept before they're given the challenge of mastery. And once they've mastered it, then they can build upon that for the next subject.
Well, that's a completely valid option when you're homeschooled, because as a parent, you can let your kids move faster if you want. You don't have to hold them back. If they've mastered a principle, you move on. And we've got to all admit, our kids, each one of them has one or two subjects that they're really just naturally gifted at. And as homeschoolers, or even in small private schools, they can focus on that. And to a certain degree, you can get that in charter schools, depending. Like my child's going to this charter school where it's smaller, so they might be able to help that, but nowhere near what you'd get with that one-on-one with the parent. And that's a good point there.
Now, a parent's time can be divided too. I mean, maybe you have 3, 4, 5 kids, however big your house is. So you're still dividing your time there, but there's still laundry to do and dishes to wash, and there's money to make and whatever. So there are distractions for a home-based family school as well. But the point is that with something like Khan Academy or any other curriculum, it can be tailored to the child, and there's a lot better ability for the parent to be able to do that. And that's the focus of this, like Khan Academy free online teaching, right? So the problem, like you were saying, we have this archaic system that cannot bend, and there are studies that were done about individualizing education, but they were done in like the 30s, and at the time we didn't have the technology to be able to do it, and they were like, it's just too inefficient, we can't do this, and that's where they've stayed ever since. And so so we have this resolution they're trying to get passed to get all this new money. And I think you and I both agree the problem is not the money. Sure, money can solve little problems, but it will not lead to better outcomes on the whole. It just doesn't happen.
Our own state auditor, John Dougal, did a report analysis that said we only get a 1% improvement in test scores with $900 million. That's basically what he says it equates to. That it's almost $1 billion for us to go up 1% on the whole. And so obviously and parents always say, and pundits always say, more money won't make the system better. But the teachers and administrators say, well, yes, but it'll help alleviate a lot of stress using our own funds to do things. And I admit they probably do use their own funds. But here's the thing that I have a problem with is that the Utah State Legislature, and I was up there this year when they approved this, is that they redid the budget in a way that they are going to raise the WPU over the next 3 years, the weighted pupil unit, which is how they determine how much money to give out of the budget to the school system. That's what per pupil spending is. And so just this last session, they approved an increase of spending. So they're taking money we're already paying, so no increase. But over 3 years, it's going to create about the same equivalent as this $700 million tax increase. Like next year, I think it's $144 million will be increased in spending. So here we have this reallocation of funds, which is great. But now we're going to double that in the next 3 years with this initiative. And so it's like, yeah, we did our homework and we did better as legislators financially, but now we're still going to come at you. And I read something, Randall, when they initially came up with this idea, they were just going to do an income tax increase of 0.875. Well, and then they thought that won't work. That's too much. So what we'll do is we'll do a 0.5% increase on income and a 0.5% increase on sales tax.
Right.
So they're going to get you when you get paid, and they're going to get you when you buy stuff. And that fundamentally is going to hurt the poorest of the poor. They said the average Utah will pay $800 with both of these together. But if you make more income, you're going to pay more. And so the income tax, and I was at that meeting last night, they had 7 consecutively at the same time, 6 p.m. around the state. And so I saw the room evenly divided. Administrators over here with teachers, and then the rest of the public. And this is why we're talking about this a little. I think government education can never fundamentally work because the funding mechanism and the wheel that it turns on are completely opposed to the self-interest of parents. People don't want to pay more taxes, and teachers constantly want to get more money. And those forces will never work because you're fundamentally using the force of government on the citizen saying you will pay more for your child's education. Also, Randall, you know what I hate? I hate the fact that old people and people without kids and young people have to pay taxes that go to education when they don't have a personal stake in it. And don't give me this crap about the social contract and how everyone's smarter, it's all better, and the economy's better, and it's just your social duty. Bull crap. You don't have a responsibility to pay for my kid's education.
Well, you know, part of the...
Or Randall, you're homeschooling. You shouldn't be paying taxes for my kids. Sorry, well, I had to get that in.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. But I think it's interesting because here in Utah, I mean, they even bring this out in a lot of the propaganda for this initiative, is that we have the lowest per pupil spending, and we have an interesting dynamic in Utah that creates that. That doesn't mean that we spend the least amount of money. That's the way they couch it when they talk about it on the, you know, in their materials, but that doesn't mean we spend the least amount. What it means is that we have the least per pupil spending. And we have an interesting dynamic because we have typically large families in Utah, right, which means that there are more students per taxpayer, right? So we end up with schools that are full of kids and less taxpayers to cover those expenses. And then another thing you brought up where you said that they were saying this would raise the income tax by an average of about $800 per person. And some of these articles there, they were talking about how these parents thought it was just abhorrent that you know, at the first day of school, they're asked by their teachers to maybe send in some boxes of tissue or a ream of paper or some pencils or whatever. And they're saying, I think it's just sad that we don't have the money at the school level to buy these things. And I'm just thinking, for $800, I could buy a lot of pencils and paper and tissues. And, you know, I could probably supply several classrooms for $800. So it's like, okay, what are you giving up here? Another point. Okay, I'm gonna use a pen. I don't know. This is not gonna work. Okay.
This is an object lesson.
Yeah, this is an object lesson. Here, time over time, this has been studied and over again, where they look at the increase in per pupil spending, you know, right, in school districts across the U.S., and the funding for these schools keeps going up and up and up, and the test scores either remain flat or they're declining. And so it's like, okay, so we want to spend more and more money, but if we're based on testing outcomes, then there is absolutely no justification for more spending. It just doesn't make sense. And right, and for listeners, if you want to you know, take a look at some of that, go John Stossel. I know, love him or hate him, I love him. I think he did a great job with this 2020 bit that you can still get from ABC. You may be able to find part of it on YouTube or something called Stupid in America, where he talks about this because they were talking about to all these educators who were saying, you know, well, how much money is enough money? He's like, oh, lots, millions and millions, you know. They have no idea. They just want more money in the system under their control. I saw this when I was working in higher education in IT. It was like the whole goal of people who were up, my supervisors and whatnot, their whole goal was not about providing better services or more efficient services or effective services. It was doing everything they could to tie up different segments of the budget under their control. Why?
Oh, wow, that was tug of war.
Yeah, it was all about power. And that's what happens. That's what happens in these scenarios. You have individuals, either teachers or administrators or whatever. They want this because this money is power and control. It doesn't mean that, you know, like they were saying, some of the school districts get like $7 or $27 million. I think in southern Utah, it was something like $27 million that they were saying was going to come down here. That $27 million, most of it will never make it to the school. Most of it will end up in administration and administrative waste. I mean,
no, they
totally.
assured us is based on goals, the distribution.
Okay, yeah.
That's
right.
what they said.
I'm sure that's what they said.
It's going to always work out like that.
But it never works the way that they say it's going to work, especially when it comes to money. They're going to say, okay, well, we got this money. You and we were talking to someone who was an administrator for a fund of tax dollars here in southern Utah. And the group that was receiving the tax dollars, they had a specific mandate that they could not spend the tax dollars on bonuses or salaries or anything, right?
Yeah.
And what was the first thing they wanted to do that this administrator said that he had to stop them from doing?
Give everyone a raise.
They wanted to give everyone a raise because they got all this extra money. And so it wouldn't ended up helping the school or the students. It would just go to the administrators. And so I don't know. I keep going. I need to give you a moment to talk here, but one more point. There was a country called New Zealand. It's a real country. It's in the southern hemisphere. Go look it up. Where they got tired of this problem, where they didn't have enough funding in the schools. So what they do, they got rid of all the middle administration. They had the administration at the state level or the province level, whatever they call it there in New Zealand. I don't remember. And then they had the school, and they had a group of lay administrators being parents who would help determine how the funds were allocated in the school along with the principal. And so doing this, they cut millions and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of waste. And they had all that money go directly to the schools, to the students to help improve their education. So they cut out these levels. So it's like, I'm not advocating any one method. I'm trying to get out there that this method, which is being talked about, is not an effective method. Throwing money at the problem never solves it. You go to any businessman and they will tell you that there's no way that they're going to solve it by, they can't just throw money at a problem. They've got to figure out a real solution that either cuts costs or has a more efficient way of fixing things. If they stay the way they are and they're losing money, they're going to continue to lose money even if they spend more money on the problem.
Well, I heard someone in the audience along those lines last night say, and one of the parents, look, any business that ran like the education system does would go out of business and would have to shut down. So government perpetuates a cycle. And here's a thought I had. I looked at all these educators and I'm like, okay, they're great, but I'll bet you 90% of them have never owned a business. There's one thing not taught in government schools is entrepreneurialism. So it's like you're not preparing the kids to actually improve the economy. You're teaching them to go to college and get a job. Now, we need that in any economy. We need workers with the way things are, but you don't have any teachers teaching entrepreneurialism. They just, because they can't. They haven't done it. They can't do it. And that's not part of the curriculum to build a business.
No, it's not part of the curriculum to build a business. It's not part of the curriculum to understand civics or how your government works. No. It's not part of the curriculum. Anything which could give people an opportunity or ability, basic accounting, how to manage your finances, that's not even taught. We talk about all these abstract things, but there's nothing that's down to earth that these students can actually take out the door when they graduate and do something effective with it. They only have an avenue to more school. That's it.
And I made the comment, the final comment, because I stood up and took 3 minutes, and my final comment is, we can't fix the education problems until we get out of the unconstitutional federal education system. So the funny thing about it is unconstitutional to have a national education system. It's not enumerated. It's not the proper role of government, especially on the federal level. And so here we have a national system with a Department of Education. Do you think that they're going to teach proper federalism? They don't know what it is, number one. And number two, no, they would not teach against the system that they're all a part of. It doesn't make any sense.
Now there are glimmers of light. I have to say, again, full disclosure, my father was an educator in the government education system. He taught third grade, second grade, even some high school early on. And he saw it from the inside, but he was someone who he didn't like to see the expansion of programs and the expenditure of money that was just waste. He saw how some of these programs came in with great promises of making big changes in these students' lives, and then just, they made life a living, hell on earth essentially for the educators who were trying to implement them. And it's like, so we have these programs. We're like, we need to get this money, but really, all these teachers who were there, I can almost say that 90% of them, if not 100% of them, were there because the teachers union told them, you have to be there. This is what we have to have. The teachers union is more concerned with keeping teachers employed or keeping teachers paying union dues than it is about educating children. It's concerned about increasing their power and capacity more than it is about educating children. Isn't that what it's supposed to be at the end of the day? To educate the child? We don't care anymore. That's not what this is about. This is not about children. And I don't know whether to think that like Gail Miller and Mr. Anderson, whether they're culpable in trying to help grow the power of the teachers union, or whether they just are useful stooges thinking that they're we're gonna make a difference for these kids. We're gonna help them. We need more money. We need more money. It's just what we need. I wouldn't. Well, I was gonna say I would love to be able to just go out and ask people for money and be able to get millions and millions of more dollars in funding, but I wouldn't, because that's below where I am. I wouldn't do that. It's not right.
I would love to see you resist that, Randall. Well, yeah. I made that point last night, is that I actually have a video with the audio recorded, and I'm going to bring that out here tonight or tomorrow. But I said, what's funny is a lot of these people that are heading this on Our Schools Now effort, they're all count my vote people. They are all the ones trying to fundamentally change the political system in Utah. And I don't want to get into count my vote and all that, because there's different sides to it. But the point is, we made the suggestion that why don't we give them tax breaks so they can make contributions to school districts of their choosing? Why are they coming to the common folks? And I said, like Hank Paulson, when they had the bailout, coming to the American people asking for more money. Right. Because they're the wealthy. And the other thing, too, is they admitted last night that some Utahns are going to be hit by between 15 and 25% with the sales and the income tax combined. It depends on your income. Now, remember last year, and I said to Representative Stannard that I said, verify me if I'm wrong on this, but I said we had 3 sizable tax increases last year: sales, gas, and property, and now here we have 2 more coming in, sales and income. I mean, that's 2 in sales in 2 years. It's ridiculous. And he nodded his head. Yeah. He got up and spoke, and he talked about the school districts in D.C. getting the highest funding per pupil, and the outcomes were dismal. And he said that to the body, and so I was like really glad to see him say that. Although Rep. Stannard is part of the reason that we have a 150,000 square foot tech center coming into St. George, which is funded almost completely by taxpayer dollars. $31 million by the state of Utah, $6 million by local residents, and then I think they raised $2 or $3 million in private funding. So I thought it was weird that he's advocating, and he works at the DXATC too. So he's advocating for that tax money to come in when it affects him directly, but not when it's for schools, although he may have kids in it. So I just thought, like, I can't tell how some of these politicians vote, like Chaffetz and all of them. They don't make any sense. They're not principled and predictable. So there you go.
So where is the responsibility? Where does the responsibility lie for the education of children.
With your mom. And by mom, your mom, I mean everyone's mom and dad.
Right. Ultimately,
sorry, I had to make a your mom comment in there.
No, but that's 100% correct. It's ultimately the purview of the parents and should always be the purview of the parents. Society, to talk about society as a whole, which really doesn't exist, but society wants to say that it's the responsibility of society in order to raise these kids to help them make decisions, to help them make life choices, whatever. It's part of society, and that's really that takes a lot of parents. Now, I'm not saying all of them, because there are lots of responsible parents out there, but it takes some parents, and it just distances them from the responsibility which is theirs as a parent to help teach and educate children, right? They don't even think about it. It's just, you're going to school. You're going to go get educated. That's their responsibility. And so if that's the general belief of your populace, that this group of people is supposed to educate your kids and it's not your responsibility. And when I say responsibility, that doesn't mean that the individual has to educate their kids one-on-one, homeschool, whatever. It's being self-reliant, being accountable for how you educate your children, right? So if you say, I choose to send my kids to public school or government school or private school or charter school or whatever, that you own the decision and you make the decision consciously versus saying, you know what? I don't want the kids in the house. Get out of here. Go to the government babysitting program. Why in the world are we paying more money for the government babysitting program? Seems like all you need is a big padded room and, some straitjackets, and that would save a ton of money. Just put in a tape.
Corporal punishment.
Just put in a tape with the lesson for the day and make them sit there, lock them down so that they can listen and they can't get around and do anything, and then let them go at the end of the day so they can go and harass their parents again later. I mean, it's just, obviously, we're not advocating that. So just, for you people who may think that I was actually advocating that.
You were.
Totally.
You hate children. You don't want them to learn. I'm a socialist. That's my immediate comeback. Well, Randall, let me share this, and I want to add the money to it. State of Utah has a single personal income tax with a flat rate of 5%. According to the Tax Foundation, total income tax collections in Utah average $833 per person. This is the 23rd highest in the country. So we're mediocre at best with taxes. Sales tax in Utah range from 5.95% to 8.05%, depending on local rates. Now, the point is, the average being $833 per person, we have a potential of $800 minimum hitting Utahns or up, depending on income level. So you could easily put the average up to $1,200 to $1,600 a year based on the sales and income tax. The other thing I want to bring up, Randall, because you're a tech guy, last night, one of the biggest complaints, it came from all the parents and citizens, was that kids don't get to bring home a textbook anymore. That bugged so many people. And I thought, we're not living in 1932. Like, who cares about the textbooks? They're a waste of money anyway, and they're outdated in a year. And then the textbook companies make a lot of money, especially in college, forcing them to buy it. So the local K through 12 schools, they only buy one or two per class, and they just let everybody use it, and you can't bring it home. So I just thought to myself, we're not living in the era of paper books. Like, that doesn't bother me at all. No, I don't think that's a sign that it means anything.
No, I think that's fantastic. That's a great cost-cutting measure that the schools have implemented, and they should do more of it. But they shouldn't ask for more money. They should reemploy those dollars that they saved effectively. Ultimately, the book company is making off like a bandit because they probably charge a licensing fee, and they don't. And all they have is ones and zeros to push around instead of actually printing paper books. So they're probably making better, and hopefully the schools are costing less. But then they're putting that money, most likely. A lot of schools have initiatives. I don't know how many in Utah specifically, but to move to tablets for the kids, iPads, and other resources like that. So technological resources, they're fantastic. They help the kids, can help the kids to learn, but I see one major flaw in that, which is education doesn't advance like technology advances. And so the schools get around to putting in a new computer lab or getting iPads or whatever, and within a year or two, it's behind the times. The kids don't want it anyway because it's old tech, and they're given all the new tech right up front.
Sure.
And so we have to spend all this money on technology that may or may not actually improve the outcomes. If it's used effectively, or maybe you say, okay. Belgium, man. How do they fund their education system? I'm just picking Belgium because I'm familiar with the way they do it somewhat. A lot of other locations, I think, probably do the same thing. When you have X number of dollars, right? We've got a dollar figure per student. Like it costs $3,500 per student or whatever to educate them every year. In a place like Belgium, they've decided to tie that amount to the student. So the student can then choose and not go just to the school that they're geographically close to, but they can go to whichever school and the funds go with them. So without having to do extra testing in order to figure out whether the school is teaching well, they can determine that because they have more and more students going there, which means that school has more funding, which means that school can afford more teachers, which means yada, yada.
Is that just based on enrollment then, like the number of kids? That's what they disperse?
Yeah. So when your child goes to that school, the tax dollars that would go to educate them go to the school they enroll in. I mean, a similar thing happens to charter schools here in Utah. They want to get the numbers up because their funding from the state is tied to those numbers of enrollees that they have.
Well, and I'll throw in the charter school that my son's going to. He just spent 2 years in public school, was at the charter the year before that, or 2 years before that. And he's going back to the charter school because he just had a better experience. There were more options. It just was, overall, he just enjoyed it more. So he's chosen to go back. And I'm like, fine, go back to the charter then.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, and so it's like there are other ways to deal with this, and I don't know that we've really thought them through. We're just like we're saying here, we want to throw more money at the problem because if we get the per pupil spending way up here, then it's going to make everything better. And
right,
you also talk about what the motivation of these big folks that are prominent individuals that are helping promote it. Are they trying to tie in along with this, some education consulting? Do they have some firm or industry that's tied to the education?
They don't
group?
say that.
I know they don't say that, but that's always a question.
Last night, they came down and said the big businesses, tech companies need a better workforce. So they did it in a holistic look at the general state. And I'm like, nobody does this because they're going to spend a lot of money getting signatures and a lot of money running ads.
You bet they're going to spend it.
Older people to tug their heartstrings.
So that's why I wonder if this is more an outgrowth of the teachers' union, and they've got some spokespeople to work for them, like the head of Zions Bank and what the owner of the Jazz, Gail. Can't think of her name.
Miller. Yeah, Larry H. Miller.
Did they just plead their case so they could get them to stand up and do it, or are they getting paid? Or
maybe there's more to it than even that.
Right.
The more money you get into public schools, the more likely kids are to go to public schools if they have all these nice buildings, these Taj Mahals.
No, Buckingham Palaces.
These palaces, and they will fund better sports programs. But maybe it's, as I said, it's a count my vote, folks. Maybe there's this grand conspiracy to more kids into public education because those people tend to stay within their parents' political moorings. Like if you have more private and homeschooled kids, you can't control or manipulate them like you can public educated kids, unless you have a parent like me who undermines some of the things they're taught and teaches the, grand principles.
You underminer, you.
The underminer.
Incredibles. Okay.
Maybe there's some grand conspiracies here because these people are always doing the same things with the Hinckley Institute. It drives me crazy, man. These people.
Well, one of the things I thought was really interesting is even one of the quotes, where was it? Salt Lake Tribune quoted, a member from the, I'm trying to remember. It was one of the representatives from the Democratic Party who was even saying this doesn't make sense from any point of view because it taxes the low wage earners, and it just is going to be an awful thing overall. I think that was his focus, was because it taxed the low. Well,
let me share.
Earners.
If you don't mind, let me share some of that Salt Lake Tribune article. It was called "Varying Receptions for Our Schools Now Initiatives, 700 million plus tax increase." Now, the picture they show is 2011's Teacher of the Year for Utah, Gay Beck. She's up there promoting it, of course. She's very excited about it. And there's this picture of the crowd, and they're quite small. We had more people in St. George than what they had at the meeting. Now, St. George area has about 150,000, while Utah County area has 560,000. So I'm really surprised by the pitiful turnout. But I did want to share along that lines of these. Well, it says Kip Jardine questioned why multimillionaires and billionaires were asking taxpayers to foot the bill for our schools now without fully disclosing their own efforts to support public education. They're asking us for money, but they're not telling us much. Then they said this: other comments dismissed Our School Now's campaign materials as propaganda and critiqued the public educational system as a socialist failure forced upon Utah settlers as a requirement for statehood. Quote, "The early Mormon pioneers never wanted public school," end quote, said Alan Hale. "In our public schools, we do not talk about God. We do not hear about God." Love it. So there were people at my meeting said the same thing. This is a socialist system. And as I said, it's Marxist. It's Industrial Revolution. They're complaining about textbooks, all these old school things, when if you want to jump to the top of the tech heap, then that's where you go. But if these tech companies like Adobe want smarter public, then get in there and start funding them. You know what I wish, Randall? I wish the LDS Church had its own system. Not just colleges and universities, but K through 12. I know you and I were on the board of a private school one time called Zion Youth Academy. Yeah. And as a board member, it was fascinating. And it was very difficult to fund. We saw that firsthand because the public schools kept sucking the kids away for sports and just the social aspect.
And the funds,
And the funding.
So the family doesn't have those tax dollars. So if they want an alternative form of education, they have to fund it out of their own pocket. And they're still funding public education.
I know. The irony is ridiculous. And these teachers will never allow, they didn't like, what was the school choice thing? What's that thing that we had the big political fight over with schooling?
Oh, vouchers.
Vouchers, which really didn't solve much. But they wouldn't even let vouchers go through. So they definitely do not want to sever from the federal system. And they definitely do not want to sever from government in Utah. And I had that conversation with Governor Herbert, the education governor, in 2010. And I said, look, we're rich. We have so many natural resources, shale oil and coal and everything. If you open up a part of that, and if we fund education by 80%, get out of the federal education system and start making Utah the best system in the nation because it has more money, like everybody always wants. But then you could change it to a system where we actually grade teachers on merits. We do all kinds of custom programs. I said, would you ever even look at something like that? You know what he says? No, I would never consider it. I'm like, I wanted to say thanks for selling out our kids, Gary, while praising education.
Right. Well, but that's the thing. It's all about politics. It's all about machinations. It's all about back behind the door deals. It's not about the kids. The kids are a pawn in this scheme, you know. And part of the argument was, well, we have lots of, you know, we can't get teachers because we can't pay them enough.
That's what they said last night.
Yeah, and so that's great. So why do we have such enormous facilities? Those are expensive. They're expensive to build. They're expensive to maintain. We got to spend all this money. You know, we don't pay it out of pocket day one because they always bond for it. But you got to pay that interest and pay back that over time. And so that costs money too. And it's like, you know what? Kids learn in my house, which is not a grandiose house. I mean, heck, it's got outdated all sorts of things, floors and piping and, you know, but they learn. And that's the same thing that can happen in any school. You know, when I was going to school, they'd built an addition onto the school I was in, but most of the classes I had were in these old classrooms. They'd been there, you know, I was there in the 90s and the classrooms had been built in the 70s. They were fine. They had brick walls and they had cement or linoleum floors, or I mean, whatever, the tile floors and you know, drop ceilings, just like all these other rooms have now.
And probably asbestos.
Oh, maybe, but it's okay as long as you leave it alone. Anyway, but the point is we spent all this money. They tore down most of that building to build a bigger building right next to it in order to teach these kids, when at the end of the day, you know, the education didn't become any better because the building got bigger or more grandiose, or just because they added a place for projectors in every room, or you know, whatever. Sure, it's great to give teachers these tools, but there are ways to do it without going crazy over the top. And that's right. Why we hire superintendents or principals or whatever, so that they can think creatively, not just think, well, I need more money. I can't do it if I don't have more money. You know, if that was the idea of every business person, you know what, I'm going to make things great, you guys just got to give me lots of money, there would be no businesses, because they've got to prove that they're worth giving money to before they can receive money. And right. But it's exactly the opposite in education. The burden of proof is, you know, it's on the kids, it's on the legislators, it's on the parents, but it's not on the schools. The schools almost get a blank check. And I'm not trying to be down on schools. Like I said, yes, my dad was a teacher. I know lots of teachers. I know lots of people who work in education, and they're good people. I'm not trying to say they're bad, but my point is, you have to get beyond this mentality that that's the only way out. If you don't, you will fail. I don't care how much money you put into it, you will fail. I wanted to bring up one of those in Stupid in America. One of the examples he used is that in Kansas City, they had a court order the school district to expand funding by so many tens of millions of dollars or whatever, that they were required. The school district was required to have so much more spending. So they did. They went out, they built huge, amazing facilities with Olympic-sized pools and great weight rooms and just the best facilities they could get. They didn't have enough buses, so they even used taxis to bring kids into school so they could get them in there. And you know what they found? The outcome was no better. It was worse, you know, as they went along, even though they had these amazing facilities.
Yeah.
It didn't make a lick of difference. And we put so much emphasis on the experience of going to school or making sure our kids have a great self-esteem. Well, we've talked about it on here. That doesn't matter. If an experience is painful, you're going to learn from it. And you don't need some big expansive building that's just super cool and amazing and awesome in order to have that. It removes the pain from you. It's that pain that allows you to grow and innovate and really see things through a better lens. And we're
Sure.
taking that away from our kids. We're robbing them of it. And so to give more money to this education system would be a sin. It would be a sin because we would be perpetrating awful. I can't even think of the word. It's so bad. Anyway, it would be perpetrating an awful abuse of our children upon them.
Yeah.
It doesn't give them the opportunity that they need to grow. What we have is sufficient.
Well, and one of the points I made last night to the crowd, and I looked at specifically at the teachers, I said, all these problems are solvable. We go for decades, and we never solve this, and we're always fighting the same argument. We need more money. We don't want tax increase.
You got it last time.
We don't want it. It's like, dude, we solved the problems by actually attacking each problem, and the first thing is to get out of the federal system so that we have complete independence. And there's a couple things that really stood out to me last night, and in that picture of the Aura meeting, is that there was only 50 people maybe, and half are for and half are against. But what happens is they get the signatures, and they're going to do crap like they did with Count My Vote, go in front of the movie theaters and just get ignorant people to sign these things. And then they're going to run a bunch
so we'll let you go to the movie?
Yeah, and I'm going to actually record next time I see them, and I'm going to get it on video, me confronting them. But they'll just run a bunch of ads. And the problem we have is that a huge majority of voters are at least 60 and up in Utah. And that frustrates me because these are the people who aren't educated, except for a small number like the ones that were there last night. So they're just swayed by these things. And if someone looks like a good lady or a good guy, they go with it. And here's the other thing that bothers me, Randall. These people that are heads of like Zions Bank, as you said, Ron Gibson, who's a retired chairman, CEO of Questar. Yes, we have the bigwigs. But then I looked at 50 other Utah business, community, and education leaders. As I mentioned, Gay Beck, Utah Teacher of the Year. But this is the one that just chaps my hide. Lane Beatty, President and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce has been pushing this. Here's another one. Elaine Dalton. If you're Mormon, you probably recognize that name. Former General Young Women President, LDS Church. You cannot promote your former church position in a government matter. I saw Bishop Burton do that with UTA when they tried to raise taxes by 40%. When they tried to raise infrastructure tax and wanted to give 40% to the UTA, and they had Bishop Burton come up there. This aggravates me to no end that church members would use their affiliation, and yet we have affiliate crime is huge in Utah. We need to bust it. Well, to me, I wouldn't say this is criminal, but this is very wrong to use your position in a church to advocate for government programs. And fundamentally, what you're doing is you're decreasing the amount of income that church members have that they could use to pay tithing or to use in their education of their children. Bam!
Yeah.
What do you got to say to that?
Duplicitous is what I've got to say to that.
Irony. Yeah, it's really frustrating when these people who are, I mean, it's Utah. We're supposed to be the reddest of the red, which that's how we vote. But really, that red is becoming blood. We are in the red. We're only 23rd best in the nation in taxation, yet we're the most conservative. We hear about fiscal conservatism. This is not fiscal conservatism. When your education governor says he will never consider getting us out of the federal education system or opening up some of our resources so we can get more property tax to take care of the kids, it ain't about the kids at that point. I mean, it's honestly
about power. It's about
power.
It's about control.
Status quo. Yeah.
That's where it lays. Power and control. That's what this is about. It's not about the money, but when we pass a tax or a law, it creates a new status quo, right? And so we don't ever repeal the status quo. We only build upon it. We make it more expensive, higher taxes, more regulations. It's so difficult to get rid of them. Just vote no. Just vote no. Don't give in to this garbage.
Yeah, we can't continue this path. We've really got to help the kids. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. If you can, go over to YouTube, PYROLITICAL Live, and subscribe to our channel.
Yeah. Take care. Have a good evening.
Peace out.